Is some pony in the guest room, AJ? Apple Bloom asked that night, her large eyes looking up at her big sister with curiosity. Yep, said Applejack, not seeing why it should be kept a secret. Found Rainbow Dash in pretty old bad shape. She's resting up something fierce, so keep your voice down so y'all don't wake her. Rainbow Dash? She isn't hurt, is she? Did she crash doing one of her old stunts? Asked Apple Bloom, tugging worriedly at the large bow on her mane. Nah, she'll be fine. You know how fast she gets up after a fall, which she didn't actually do, by the way. Okay, good thing Scootaloo's in here. She'd have a cow if she saw Dash out of the sky, said the yellow filly. Applejack chuckled in agreement, knowing how much her sister's friend idolized Rainbow Dash. The entire Apple family sat down at the dinner table. Granny Smith and Big Macintosh joined in slowly. So, what happened to Dash? Asked Applejack's older brother, brushing the dust from the orchard off his red coat. Applejack respectfully removed her hat, hanging it from the back of her chair. Don't rightly know, she replied. I went to see her at her house and bring her some of our apples, and she looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. She couldn't even stand without passing out. Is there a Wonder Colts tryout or something? Asked Big Mac. Wonder Bolts, big bro, laughed Applejack. And no, not that I've heard of anyhow. Anyway, I couldn't very well leave her, so I brought her to the farm, gave the poor mare some breakfast, and she fell asleep just like that. Do you know what's wrong with her? Asked Granny Smith, suddenly intrigued by the conversation. There was an air of concern in her voice, as if Rainbow were part of the family. I guess that's her business. She didn't seem to want to talk about it, so I just let it go, said the orange farm pony. However, Applejack wasn't satisfied with not knowing what was bothering her friend. Whatever had happened, it seemed to tear the poor Pegasus apart. She knew that Rainbow Dash was a hard-headed mare and wouldn't let any pony know about her problems. But that was the problem. Applejack and her friends had always hit a wall whenever Rainbow had a problem. As much as they wanted to help her, the stubborn ponies simply wouldn't have it. The only help they were ever allowed to be was to cheer her on during her aerial acrobatics. Applejack may have found frustration in this, but also respect and familiarity. She knew how that felt more than any pony, to feel the urge to handle her problems on her own, let no pony else help until absolutely necessary. Well, it definitely seemed like Dash's time to need help, but she still remained resolute and unwilling to share her problems and let others help. Why can't you let me help you, Dash? I'm just trying to be your friend, thought Applejack. Rainbow Dash felt her head lift unintentionally, wincing at the sudden light peering through the curtains that hung over the window. It was sunrise. She must have slept an entire 24 hours. It took her a few minutes to remember where she was, or even how she got there. She remembered eating for the first time in days, and then nothing. Applejack had brought her here, fed her, and gave the tired Pegasus a bed to sleep in. Dash felt the vice return to her heart, unable to flinch at the familiarity of the pain. Fortunately, her hunger and exhaustion had been quelled, and now she only felt one sort of pain, which was better than the complete misery she was in the day before. The Scion Pegasus slowly found her strength and got herself to her haunches, flipping her rainbow mane out of her eyes. Suddenly, the door to the small guest room opened, and Dash saw a small yellow filly with a red mane and a large bow. She carefully stuck her head into the room, her large amber eyes focused on Dash. "Oh, good morning, Rainbow Dash," she squeaked in an accent like a younger version of Applejack. "Are you feeling any better?" Rainbow didn't mind that the filly knew she was here, or if she was in bad shape the day before. It didn't really matter too much for some reason. "Morning, Apple Bloom," Dash yawned, placing a hoof over her mouth politely. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just needed some rest. Rough week. Practicing." "As long as you're okay. I don't know what Scootaloo'd do if you weren't around." Apple Bloom nodded happily before disappearing back into the hallway. Dash smiled at that. Scootaloo had been taking flying lessons from her for the past few months. She had shown potential and plenty of energy, two things that were essential for a good young flyer like Dash. She had enjoyed spending her days with the young filly because she saw herself in Scootaloo's determined eyes. She was like that little sister she had never had. Maybe she would see if she could find her today. At least that would help take my mind off Applejack. Aw, darn it! Rainbow beat her forehead with a hoof. A full 2 minutes without thinking of that darned farm pony. What a fantastic record. Dash listened around the old house for any other pony. She heard nothing but the creaking of a rocking chair from the floor above. Granny Smith must have been crocheting or some other kind of old mare activity. She decided to go find Applejack, thank her for taking care of her, and fly off and find Scootaloo. If Dash needed anything, it was a distraction. Instead of awkwardly interacting with Granny Smith and Apple Bloom again, Rainbow simply slid open the old window and leaped out onto the soft green grass. Ahead of her was the vast expansion of apple trees that was Sweet Apple Acres. It didn't take long for her to spot the orange coat amongst the sea of brown tree trunks, green leaves, and red apples. But before taking off to say her goodbye, Rainbow merely sat on her haunches and stared after the object of her affection. The farm pony gracefully swung her body around to deliver a swift kick to the tree next to her, being instantly rewarded by a hail of red delicious apples falling neatly into the baskets around her. Her grace was only matched by her strength. Dash had admired that about Applejack, how she was able to buck apples every day to serve her family, doing so with an undying work ethic, something Dash lacked. Where she was lazy, Applejack was hard-working. She was everything Rainbow was, but also everything she wasn't. The farm pony was simply more than her. Applejack was a better pony than her. So much better. "I don't deserve her," Dash whispered to herself. "She deserves so much more than me. She needs another hard-working, kind-hearted pony to be with. A colt." She thought of turning and flying away, but just knew Applejack would see her. She also knew that she needed to thank her for help and hospitality, even if talking to her tore her heart to pieces. With a shuddering sigh, Rainbow Dash composed herself and strode forward towards Applejack. With a well-placed final kick to a rather defiant apple tree, Applejack sighed with relief as the remaining fruit it bore fell into the 2 baskets below. It wasn't even noon yet, but the young mare was already starting to feel fatigued. It had taken a while for her to fall asleep the previous night, for she had spent hours raking her brain trying to figure out what had bothered her friend to the point of malnourishment, dehydration, and insomnia. As long as Applejack had known Rainbow Dash, the Pegasus had never let any problem or obstacle in her life get the better of her, nor did she seem to dwell on them. But yesterday she found her friend doing the exact opposite, and Applejack knew it wasn't because of work. She hadn't seen Dash in the sky for almost a week now, but found twice the amount of Pegasi working tirelessly to pick up the slack her friend had left behind. It seemed like without Rainbow Dash working, the weather team was distraught, confused, and overworked. The farm pony had never known or appreciated the amount of work her friend actually did in such a short time she wasn't napping or practicing her aerial acrobatics. So what had happened to Rainbow Dash to put her in such an exhausted state? It worried her friend to the point of considering trapping Dash in a situation where she could be questioned without flying away. Now, let's not take drastic measures or nothing. Maybe she confided in Fluttershy or some other pony, thought Applejack. But then, why couldn't she trust me? It didn't make any sense. Applejack hadn't given Dash a reason not to completely trust her, so it wasn't a matter of who she confided in. The farmer pawed at the ground in confusion. Suddenly, Applejack saw Rainbow Dash walking towards her, her eyes unfocused and looking at the ground in front of her. While she was still looking better than she had the day before, the Pegasus still had those dark bags under her eyes, although they were not as heavy-looking. She couldn't even seem to walk straight, her steps not in any sort of line, but staggered. There was a second when Applejack thought she was going to fall again, but thankfully she was wrong. "Hey, AJ," she said, not looking her in the face. Her eyes were only half open. How could she still be so exhausted? She'd slept long enough to be considered comatose. "Morning, Sugar Cube. Did you sleep all right? Y'all still look like y'all done get hit by a train," said Applejack, not worrying if she would take an insult. Rainbow Dash wasn't one to care about vanity. "Yeah, I did," she replied, even though her voice was still shaky. "Listen, I just wanted to stop by and say thanks for letting me stay before I flew off." "Before you flew—" the farmer started angrily before exhaling. "Rainbow, you're in no condition to be flying. You're obviously still in bad shape. You may have slept in for a while, but y'all can't just recover from such exhaustion without taking a day to replenish your fluids, eating, and rest." "AJ, I'll be fine," said Rainbow, waving a hoof dismissively. Applejack exhaled once more, trying her hardest not to yell at the stubborn pony. Instead, she took on a caring voice in an attempt to grab Dash's attention. "Look, Rainbow, I know I said y'all don't have to tell me what's going on with you, and you don't. But I ain't dumb neither. You haven't been to work, so you're not busy. Something's bothering you in a right mess. And I just want to let you know y'all can tell me anything. You don't have to hide behind a wall. I'm your friend, aren't I?" The entire time the farm pony had spoken, Rainbow hadn't even looked at her, but at the ground between her forehoofs. Several seconds went by before she finally said, "Geez, AJ, I just woke up. It'll take a few minutes before I'm actually awake. There's nothing wrong with me. I just got a bit off this week, that's all. Anyway, I gotta go. Thanks again." And with that, Rainbow spread her wings and took off, a bit without her usual acceleration. Applejack watched her friend go without another word. Dash's reply had its same old spunk, but her last sentence was quick and forced. Why was she lying to her? What had really been going on? Applejack kicked the basket next to her in tired frustration, wishing that Rainbow wasn't as stubborn as she was. This ends Chapter 1.